Hello everybody, today we're going to be looking at my power rankings for May 30th. These are based on a combination of multiple things. So obviously the base of them are my power rankings from last week because where the teams move up or down or don't move at all from those. And then also it's not just about their record, but more who they played against and how they actually performed against those teams, like in terms of runs allowed, runs for, those kinds of things. So 30th, we have the Royals. They dropped 4 spots. Sorry. They went 0-2 against Arizona, which Arizona, yes, is overperforming technically, but still getting at least one game against them would have been probably ideal. And then they went 2-2 against Minnesota, which that's not that bad. Minnesota's a pretty top tier team, but those in the total 4 losses, against the 2 against Arizona, 2 against Minnesota, they allowed 34 runs. That's really, really high. That's 8.5 runs a game that they allowed in their losses. So you cannot be doing that. And their record's already bad. They're already the second worst record in the league. And then when you allow 7 or 8.5 runs a game, you can't really be doing that. So next, in 29th, we have the Cubs. They dropped 2. They went 2-2 against Cincinnati, the team with the worst record in the league, and then they went 1-1 against the White Sox. So all that wouldn't be horrible on its own, but one of those losses to Cincinnati was 5-20, which should not be happening. So obviously, I discussed in my Cincinnati video that a lot of their offense has significantly picked up during their 13-8 stretch, which is now 13-9. They did lose yesterday, but still giving up 20 runs against the offense, that's a big reason that they're down 2. So next, in 28th, we have the Tigers. The Tigers did not move. They had a very bad record. They still have a bad record. They went 1-2 against Minnesota. That's expected. Minnesota's at the top, like I already said. And then they went 2-1 against Cleveland. Cleveland's multiple games under 500. So they kind of performed as they should against those teams. So I don't really have any reason to move them yet. The Nationals are next at 28. They did move up 2 spots. They did beat the Dodgers in one of their 3 games, so they went 1-2 against the Dodgers. They did have a negative 14 run differential in those games, but it's against the Dodgers. That's to be expected. One of the games was 10-1, so that's a big bulk of that. Though they did go 3-1 against Colorado. Colorado now, after this week, their record dropped significantly, but they were right at 500. So go 3-1 against them for the Nationals team, who is the very bottom of the league. That says a decent amount. And in those games, they had a positive 10 run differential. So some of their movement up isn't necessarily based on their own performance. It's also partially because the Cubs and Royals did so poorly that they just dropped below them. So there's that. Next, we have the Athletics. They went down 1 spot. They didn't actually play terribly, but they went 2-1 against Seattle, which Seattle's struggling on their own. Seattle was below the A's before the end of this weekend in standings. So currently the teams are very comparable. And then they went 1-3 against Texas, who has been pretty iffy with their pitching, though that's kind of stabilized. They're getting closer to 500. Though of their 3 wins, none of them were by more than 2 runs. So that's a bit of a problem. They're not winning by much, so you want to see them being able to score more runs and keep their opponents' runs down. Next, we have probably the biggest mover. Well, tied for that. We have the Reds, who moved up 5 spots. Again, part of this is because of how other teams performed and how the Reds are at least showing potential of picking it up and kind of stabilizing out, because they were on an unsustainable pace. Like, they were on a very, 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 very bad losing pace, which is just unsustainable. But they went 2-2 against Chicago and 2-1 against San Francisco. So that's decent. Chicago's doing very poorly, but Chicago had a lot higher expectations than the Reds, so going 2-2 against them is okay. And then 2-1 against San Francisco, the team that won 107 games last season, and now is like about 5 games over 500. That's a decent amount. And they only had fewer than 4 runs for in one of the games. So they are scoring. Their scoring is picking up, as I discussed. Like, most of their entire infield, their OPS is all ticked up a decent amount. The outfield's iffy, but They are scoring. It's evident. It's directly causing them to win. So there's that. Next, we have the Marlins. The Marlins dropped 2 spots. Um, they went 0-2 against Tampa, which that's kind of expected. Not many people beat Tampa on a regular basis, but they also went 1-2 against Atlanta. So this week they did go 1-4. That's not much. There's not too much more to say about it. They tried to bulk up. It's not working too well so far. Their pitching is still pretty solid for the most part, but yeah. So they moved down 2. Next we have the Pirates. The Pirates did not move. They went 2-1 against Colorado, which they should. 1-2 or 2-1 is kind of expected. So 2-1 is decent. And then they did go 1-2 against the Padres. The Padres are at the very top, so 3-3. That's not too bad. And all the games with the Padres were really close. One of them was even a walk-off by the Padres, so they were keeping them close. It wasn't like they were being blown out or anything. So they didn't move at all, partially based on the teams around them. But if they keep performing kind of at this rate, they'll move up at least a little bit. Orioles did move up 2 spots. They went 1-2 against the Yankees, but all the games were really close. They definitely showed potential. They showed they were in every game. And then they went 2-2 against Boston. Yes, Boston is a few games under 500, but they should be performing better. So they went 3-4 against the Yankees and the Red Sox. I think that's okay. That's definitely, I think, worthy of moving them up 2 spots. The Mariners did not move at all. They are, though, on a pretty short leash. I don't want to move them down more unless they go a whole another week performing as poorly as they are. They did go 1-2 against Oakland, who they had a worse record than, but now they don't. But they also went 2-1 against Houston, who's a top team. So it's kind of iffy with them. There wasn't too much this week for me to really say yes, they should move up or yes, they should definitively move down. So next week there should be more to see with that. But yeah, so the Mariners didn't move at all. The Rockies are the biggest droppers. They dropped 6 spots. They went 1-2 against Pittsburgh, 1-3 against Washington. So they played Washington, who's at the very bottom, and they played Pittsburgh, who's supposed to be at the very bottom. Isn't too far from the very bottom, but they're performing okay. And they lost 5 of the games. They went 2-5, and in four of their losses, they allowed at least 6 runs against a Pittsburgh offense with really no legitimate star power. Brian Hayes is doing okay. Brian Reynolds isn't performing nearly as well as last season. And then the Nats have Soto and Bell, essentially. But Soto's doing well, but not super, super well. So to allow at least 6 runs in 4 of those losses is a really bad look for the Rockies. And the main reason they dropped 6 spots to 20th. They were a bit high in the first place, but I just wanted to see. I just put them up high so I would have more room to move them around and see where they end up. Next, we have the Phillies at 19. The Phillies did not move at all. They went 2-2 against Atlanta, which that's fine. They're in the same division. They had the same record going into the series. They came out with the same record. But they did go 0-3 against the Mets, which the Mets are at the very top of the league. So that's at least one win there would have been nice. But getting swept by a top team isn't necessarily the worst thing. The bad thing about it is that they're in their division, so that makes it a bit more difficult. Though the main thing here is that they had 21 runs against in that Mets series. They averaged 7 runs against a game. That's kind of where the bad comes in. The pitching is just not getting it done. Blown saves, even when the starters have reliable starts, with Dola, with Wheeler, they just aren't able to finish off the games. So they are probably on a pretty short leash. They could certainly move down a decent amount, but for now I just wanted to keep them at 19 where they are, because their record's still not horrible, but it's not very good either. Actually, the Guardians moved down 1. That was more just based on the teams around them. They didn't particularly play out of expectations. They went 1-2 against Houston, 1-2 against Detroit. So for 2-4 in the week. 1-2 against Houston's expected. Maybe 2-1 against Detroit would be better, but there's not really any worries there. Next, we have the White Sox. The White Sox are still just very iffy. They moved down 2 spots. They started the week at 500. They ended the week at 500. They went up a game, back to 500, down a game, back up a game. I don't know what the problem is. Yes, they have injuries. They have arguably more injuries than other teams, but still, that can't be an excuse for why they're still just at 500. They went 1-2 against Boston. In those two losses, they had 16 runs against both of them. That's inexcusable. And they went 1-1 against the Cubs. So it's fine. It's a 2-game series split. Nothing wrong with that. But to allow 16 runs twice against Boston is no. Just that's why they dropped twice. The Diamondbacks, they moved down 3 spots. Kind of like the Phillies, they're on a pretty short leash because they were overperforming. The Phillies are not overperforming, but the Diamondbacks were. So it makes sense to move them down, try to see if they could even get back up to 500. They're only 2 or 3 games under, but still. They went 2-0 against Kansas City, which that's solid. Kansas City is really bad. I have them at 30th, obviously. But for a team like the D-backs, who were all supposed to be down at the bottom like that, going 2-0 against any team is good to see. Though they did go 0-4 against the Dodgers. But also it's the Dodgers. And the Dodgers technically also had home field advantage because the amount of Dodger fans that were there likely outnumbered the D-backs fans. So there's that. But the Rangers are next. They moved up 5 spots. A lot of that was because the teams behind them moved down, but then also they're playing pretty decent right now. They're getting closer and closer to 500. I believe they're 23 and 25 now. Their offense is picking up. Simeon has his home run, finally. Seager's mostly getting it done. Their pitching is picking up. Everything's, for now, going well with the Rangers. We'll see where they end up in another week or two, but for now they're okay. So they went 1-1 against the Angels, and they went 3-1 against Oakland, who is obviously in their division. There weren't any threat to them within the division for a 3rd or 2nd place finish, but still. And in those 4 games against Oakland, they had 28 runs for, so there's just straight proof that their offense is doing what they need to. Red Sox moved up 4. They went 2-1 against Chicago and had 32 runs for in 2 games. Like I said, how the White Sox let up 16 runs in 2 of the games. The Red Sox scored those 16 runs in 2 games. In 2 of the games. And then they also went 2-2 against Baltimore. So if that's for a 4-3 week, their heavy performance against Chicago is a decent reason why they moved up so much. Though another win against Baltimore would have been probably ideal. The Braves moved up 3. They went 2-2 against Philly, and then they went 2-1 against Miami. So for a 4-3 week, they're doing decent against division opponents. 2-1 against Miami is what they should be doing, and then 2-2 against Philly when they had the same record at the time. That's solid. Yeah, and I mean, one of those wins was because of a Philly error in the outfield in the 9th inning, but still, they still won the game. They got it done. The Cardinals did not move at all. They went 1-1 against Toronto, 2-2 against Milwaukee. Teams that for now are pretty much on the same tier as them. Milwaukee is better. Toronto should be better, but going 50-50 against all those isn't much argument for movement. And then, again, above them, the Giants. The Giants did not move at all either. They went 2-1 against the Mets, which is solid, but then they went 1-2 against Cincinnati. So that kind of, I feel like, balances them out. They beat a really, really top-tier team, but then also lost to the bottom team. So, Giants are fine so far. They're now more games over 500. They're doing well. Okay. Next, so to the top 10, we have the Angels. The Angels moved down 3. They went 1-1 against Texas, which that's fine. Then they got swept in 4 games against Toronto. Not what you want to see. It was in LA, well, in Anaheim, but you don't want to see a 4-game sweep. Though 3 of those losses were only 1-run losses, so they were still close games, but they just didn't have that finish that they needed to really succeed. Next we have the Rays. The Rays did not move either. They went 2-0 against Miami and 2-2 against the Yankees. One more win against the Yankees or a more definitive play would have probably moved them up slightly, but what was holding me back was that they only had 9 runs in the 4 games against the Yankees. So they were only averaging slightly over 2 runs a game, which for a Rays offense isn't super high-powered. That's somewhat to be expected, but you still can't expect to win too much when you're only scoring 2 runs a game for a 4-game series. Next we have the Astros. The Astros moved down 2. They went 2-1 against Cleveland and 1-2 against Seattle. That on its own isn't too much of a concern, 3-3, but how those losses were is what is more concerning. So of the 3 losses, the scores were 1-6, 1-6, and 0-6. So they gave up 18 runs and only scored 2 in their losses. That's the concerning part. That's where they dropped 2. But their offense is still so strong that they easily have the potential to recover from this and just keep going. Like it should not hurt them in the long run at all. Especially with the Angels losing as much as they did over the weekend. I don't think Astro fans should be concerned at all. Next to the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays moved up 3. They went 1-1 against St. Louis and the 4-0 sweep in LA, like I already mentioned. So yeah, for that, they're up to 7. Their offense is picking up. They're looking more like the team that they were promised to be, the team that everyone ranked at the top. So hopefully they can keep going and play as they should the rest of the season. Next year, the Twins. The Twins moved up 2. They went 2-1 against Detroit, which as they should, and they went 2-2 against Kansas City. Another win out Kansas City, which very likely be wanted, but the Twins are playing quite well in general. Sonny Gray is looking fantastic. Went 7 shutout yesterday. He's just looking really good. Everything's going quite well for the Twins. There's no concerns there. 29-19, they're fine. Padres, I moved them down 1. They went 1-2 against Milwaukee. Milwaukee's on the same level as them, so that's not a concern. But they went 2-1 against Pittsburgh, which is, yes, that's 2 wins, but one of them was a walk-off, and none of their wins in the whole week were by more than 2 runs. So they got 3 wins in the week. 2 of them were walk-offs, and none of them were by more than 2 runs. So, especially against Pittsburgh, they should definitely be scoring more. I get not scoring against Milwaukee's pitching. That's a very difficult thing to do. But against Pittsburgh, they should be scoring a bit more and not necessarily taking them to extra innings. Next up, the Brewers moved up a spot. They went 2-1 against the Padres, as I just mentioned, and 2-2 against St. Louis. So they split with their division rival, who is right on their tail, and then the Padres they beat. So there's not much there. They more moved up because the Padres moved down. That's where that happened. The Mets have not moved at all. They went 1-2 against San Francisco. In that series, they had 25 runs for and 25 runs against. Very high numbers, but it was even, so it didn't affect the run differential at all. It's not like they let up 25 runs and only scored 5. It was even, so that's not too much of a concern. If their bats can back up their pitching, then it's okay. Then they had their 3-game sweep of Philly, which that helped solidify them at the very top up there. So they went 4-2 on the week. One of those wins was against the Giants, and then 3 against the Phillies. When yesterday they came back to walk it off, so that shows their resilience, shows their ability to actually finish out a series and not just blow it. You have the Yankees next. They moved down a spot, which is really no fault of their own. It's more the Dodgers are quite good. So the Yankees went 2-1 against Baltimore. All the games were pretty close, and then they went 2-2 against Tampa. They're still quite at the very top. There's no reason for them to move down anymore. It's more just the Dodgers who moved up, who went 2-1 against Washington, and the 3-game sweep of Arizona. So, yeah, they went 5-1 on the week. That's fantastic. When they're already at the very top and they go 5-1, you cannot argue anything but keeping them at the very top. They're quite solid, and they should be easily the top 3 for the rest of the season. Yankees looking like they have the ability to stay up there, stay with the Mets. As right now, the top looking quite solid. Nothing seems like there's nothing really of concern so far, but we'll see how the next few weeks go. Thank you.